and nature. We're moving to cities. We're spending more on time indoors. We're getting rid of recess. I hope you're not doing that in Oregon. Mercer Island, Washington just banned tag. They put it back in. There was a backlash against those of us that played tag and lived to tell the story, but we're engaging the next generation in a big way in a continuum to encourage people to play, to learn, to serve, and ultimately we hope to work in the outdoors. Enlightened businesses like Coca-Cola and American Express and American Eagle Outfitters and REI have stepped up to help us put young people to work on public lands through the 21st Century Conservation Service Corps. We would welcome the engagement of other Oregon businesses in that effort. The President announced Every Kid in the Park. For those of you with fourth graders in your lives in any dimension, every fourth grader in the United States, free pass to all of America's public lands and waters for a full year. And they can take you for free. And in partnership with the YMCA, including in the great city of Portland, we've launched a partnership to get more kids out playing and learning in public lands close to home and far away. It's also the cusp of the National Park Service centennial in 2016. Again, with the help of enlightened businesses, we are encouraging all of America to find their park. Find your park. It might be a city park. It's a place you first connected. And if I asked you all to close your eyes and think about a special place, my guess is it would be outdoors. And for Oregonians, I can imagine any number of wonderful places that you would envision. We want to make sure that every child has an opportunity to find their park. And by concentrating on fourth graders through Every Kid in a Park, we know that that's going to happen. We're continuing to preserve and protect outdoor places. The Antiquities Act is a tool in the President's toolbox, and there are many, many wonderful places that members of Congress know need protection in their states. In many cases have been working for decades on legislation that hasn't yet got across the finish line. So we've added 19 national monuments through the President's executive action, including places like the homes of Harriet Tubman and Cesar Chavez, two important figures in American history. Places like Organ Mountains Desert Peaks in New Mexico that preserve and protect everything from trackways of dinosaurs to the cave that Geronimo hid out in and where the stagecoach used to run across. And you've got special places in Oregon as well that I know folks are working on protecting. Now let me talk about something I think you all agree on given the awards given out, and that is trade. This is something else that we have been able to get done through the heroic leadership, frankly, of many members of Congress and incredibly hard negotiating and effective negotiating skills on the part of the administration. First Trade Promotion Authority, now the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which of course has been negotiated with 12 nations, including our own, that will, for the first time ever, put in place a requirement that countries uphold labor laws and environmental laws that they never did before. So why is that important? 6,000 businesses in Oregon are involved in exporting their products. We've heard from a couple of them. 1 in 5 jobs here are dependent on trade, and my guess is it's actually more than that. Your voices are really important. When I was at REI and we were negotiating, and Tim Boyle at Columbia, we worked pretty closely together, as we did with Nike and others, to work with factories to upgrade labor standards and to upgrade environmental standards. But it's very difficult to do, especially if you only represent maybe 5% of a factory's business. If you can have the power of trade with the United States of America writ large, those countries and their businesses are going to uphold labor practices that lifts the standards for workers all around the world and are going to uphold environmental standards that we all want to be a part of. And that's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership will do. It'll also help address the scourge of illegal wildlife trafficking. So I want to thank the Oregon businesses that have stood up for this. There's a saying, which I knew when I was at REI calling on companies, I didn't realize how true it was, that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I want you to think about that. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. If this is important to you, show the love and support of the people that represent you, that are doing this work and are taking courageous steps and taking a lot of heat for the positions they're taking. They need your backing and support. And I want to conclude by saying that one of them is somebody that you're going to be honoring tonight, and that is Senator Ron Wyden as your Statesman of the Year. I want to start by saying that he's got a broken right hand, so don't shake it vigorously. But if he tries to tell you he did a 180 and a basketball dunk and hurt it on the rim, he's lying. He could tell you that he did it hiking a trail with his kids, and that could be true, but the reality is he slipped in the shower at the gym. But he was at the gym, right? And he's so fit, he didn't do any more damage. So, Senator Wyden, you don't look any worse for the wear, except you were kind of writing funny with that pen. Senator Wyden and I first met when I was calling on him as a member of the outdoor industry, talking about the things that were important, as they are so much to Oregon businesses, because your outdoor recreation economy is so large. He came to visit me in Seattle when I was at REI because he was trying to find a solution for how do we deal with people who are uninsured across the United States before the Affordable Care Act passed. He is a creative, problem-solving idea guy that isn't afraid to go to a different state, to somebody he doesn't know very well, to see if there are some things that he can learn. He and I stood on the banks of the Klamath River as we announced an incredible collaboration with multiple Indian tribes, ranchers in the area, in a very, very difficult situation that has been acrimonious for decades. And I know he's working hard with his delegation to get the Klamath Basin Agreement across the finish line, and it couldn't be more important. Thank you for your leadership on that. He was the leader of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee when I was going through my confirmation hearings. He even had to meet twice with me with one particular senator, not a Republican, who will go unnamed, to convince him that I actually was a good person that he should vote for. He was a champion for that. He's a champion for outdoor recreation and the things that we take for granted, but that support this economy here in Oregon that actually benefits so many other places in the world. He's a straight shooter. He listens. He's practical. He's funny. And he is a great champion for the things that you really care about, like fixing wildland fire, being smart about energy development, being smart about conservation, and now is the ranking member on the powerful Finance Committee, working with a reasonable person, Senator Orrin Hatch in Utah. And I think if two statesmen can get stuff done, it is those two gentlemen. So he has sometimes said a statesman has got to be willing to stand alone. But Senator, you're not standing alone tonight, as we congratulate you on your ability to get things done in Oregon. So we're going to take a closer look at Senator Wyden as this year's OBA Statesman of the Year in a quick video.
It's a pretty impressive catalog of achievement.
You really look at somebody who is independent by nature, but also is independent because that's who we are as a people.
Ron Wyden is a healthy balance of intense focus on trying to solve problems, but at the end of the day, he's somebody who can walk into a town meeting and light up the room with a goofy joke or a hug with a senior that he's known for decades. He's somebody that connects with people on a lot of different levels.
If I was to think through who'd been a statesman and what made them one, common sense, a concern for the future, and an imagination. Those would be the kind of traits I'd probably think of first. Tom McCall, comes to mind immediately. Tom McCall wanted Oregon to always be out front. He wanted Oregon to always lead. Oregonians to this day still benefit from what he did to keep special places open to all.
This may sound corny, but this activist loves Oregon more than life. He can't have both very long, but the trade-off with me is perfectly okay.
I think Ron Wyden has drawn a lot of his inspiration and, frankly, know-how on how to be a successful politician and public servant from working with Wayne Morris at a very young age.
Against all the odds, all of the powerful figures in the news media, Lyndon Johnson, he said that it was wrong to be in Vietnam.
When I took my oath of office in the Senate of the United States, I didn't become the property of the Republican Party. My job, as I told the people in my state in both campaigns, was to sit in the Senate as a free man. I'm going to exercise an honest independence of judgment on the merits of issues as I see them.
And he took a lot of political, heat for it. And he responded by saying it was wrong.
Every time I've been in his office, I've always looked to make sure that Wayne Morris, that really young Ron Wyden photo was there. For me as an Oregonian, that means something. It means something that you can be an upstart in politics and you can actually accomplish great things.
It just came to symbolize Wayne Morris. It was beautiful out, as you can tell, and he was writing and thinking. That's what he did so well. And I had a chance to just spend a little time daydreaming. I often get called the senior senator now. And I point out there was really only one senior senator. That was Mark Hatfield.
We must go to the source of our own greatness. That requires the courage to look in the mirror and see ourselves as we are perceived by others. It is the same with individuals as it is with nations. You are what you do, not what you say you are.
Ron understood that he had a lot to learn, even though he had been in Congress for close to 2 decades at that point, that moving from the House of Representatives to the Senate was a change. Senator Hatfield provided a wonderful opportunity to show him the ropes.
Part of it had a little bit of a kind of proud parent to it. It was of a different party, but we'd always had very good relations. And I think he was proud of what I accomplished.
Anybody play any freshman hazing tricks on you?
Well, nothing like when I was a freshman in the House, because when I was a freshman in the House, Ronald Reagan was sworn in. A colleague, another young congressperson who became a very good friend, asked me if I had my top hat and tails. And I said, gee, I didn't know I had to have one. He said, absolutely. You got to go out and rent one. And I said, you sure I wear it? Absolutely, you got to do it. And there were 2 people on that stage in 1981 in a top hat and tails. One of them was Ronald Reagan. The other was Ronald Wyden. And my colleagues were just howling. They were purple. They were laughing so hard. Ryan, if you're watching this, I say, bring out the top hat and tails.
I was on Ron Wyden's staff from 1993 through 1998. I worked for him in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. You think of 100 senators of the world's most exclusive club. There's a lot of different personalities there, but there are none like Ron Wyden as far as approachability. Somebody who does hundreds of town hall meetings, who will go to the farthest reaches of the state to meet with constituents and share opinions, and maybe not always agree with them, but will always listen. I think that's pretty rare.
Jay Rockefeller said this to a friend once, about me. He said, I don't agree with Ron about everything. He always comes to play. I thought that was the best compliment I ever had.
every single day he has constituents across Oregon who need help trying to solve a problem with the federal government. And Ron Wyden has established, I think, really the gold standard in constituent service for members of Congress.
It is never okay for government officials to use a general warrant to deliberately invade the privacy of a law-abiding American.
So the skeptics, the people who thought that hearing wouldn't matter much and didn't think the task force would be able to reach an agreement, we showed they were wrong.
I know I'm out of time for this round. I just want you to know, Director Clapper, respectfully, I will be asking this question of you, just like we did with respect to the legal documents for targeted killings, which we finally got after 7 requests over a 2-year period, until we get an answer. Because I think Americans are entitled to a direct answer to that question. This seat in the United States Senate belongs to you, to all of you, the people of Oregon.
To me, bipartisanship is when you're trying to get something done and you don't care who gets the credit. He is somebody who's reaching across the aisle, not because they're a Republican, not because they're a Democrat or an independent, but because that's the best person to help solve a problem.
A statesman has to recognize that whenever possible, you've got to try to bring people together. Because if you want to make lasting change, that's always the best way to do it, to get everybody invested and get everybody on the program. But sometimes a statesman has got to be willing to stand alone.
So please join me in congratulating your Statesman of the Year, Ron Wyden.
Wonderful evening, and such an inflationary set of comments. My wonderful friends Scott Bolton, Jason Atkinson, who did a fabulous job on the Klamath. To have Sally Jewell here. One of my favorite experiences, I was chairman of the Energy Committee, and Sally and I had this history, and she was pretty concerned because she had never been thrust into something like a contentious confirmation hearing. It was pretty early in the session. She was worried, and I said, I think this is going to be okay. We've done some homework. And Lamar Alexander, a senior Republican, very conservative, very decent guy, saw her at the witness table and wanted to ask us questions, and nobody knew how it was going to go, although I kind of had a suspicion. And he looked over, he's from Tennessee, a Southerner, very, very articulate. Said, Ms. Jewell, let me see if I get this straight, just yes or no. You're a commercial banker. You've been a commercial banker for 19 years. Is that correct? And Sally wasn't sure how it happened. She just very quickly, yes, Senator, that's correct. And you've been the CEO of a major corporation for a number of years. Is that correct? Yes, Senator. And you're a mechanical engineer. Is that correct? Yes. And you've worked with oil companies. Is that correct? Yes. And you've been on all these boards. Yes, Senator. By this time, the whole committee is trying to figure it out. And then he looks up, doesn't break a smile, and he goes, so how in the world did you manage to get nominated? And suffice it to say, it's because everybody understands that Sally Jewell gives public service a good name. And the reality is, I think for a long time in Washington, D.C., Sally Jewell is going to be my model for why people like yourselves should be involved in government. This sage grouse issue, Sally didn't really tell you how this came together. You don't make this stuff happen by osmosis. You need somebody at the top who is going to drive it day in and day out. It's not coming to play. It's contact sport day in and day out. This, in fact, is the biggest collaborative natural resources policy. The alternative would have been to just have people suing each other for a gazillion years after conservationists and ranchers and others had put all this sweat equity into it. This is going to be the textbook case of what we have believed in our state since Tom McCall and Governor Kitzhaber worked on this. These kind of collaborations are the future of natural resources policy. The biggest and the best one has been the sage grouse. It would not have happened without Sally Jewell. Let's give her, I can't hear you very well. I can't hear you that well. I can almost hear you. All right. And Sally and I agreed not to tell the other stories, but we are so, so lucky to have her and to have Ryan Deckard at the Oregon Business Association. He consistently is a voice for bringing people together, looking at business in the largest possible context of what it can do for the community. Let's give Ryan and OBA a big round of applause. And suffice it to say, this has been, with all these kind words, also very humbling. And one of the nice things about our state is that sometimes you can have these humbling experiences on a regular basis. People come up to me in stores from Beaverton to Boardman, and they'll say something like the checker, the grocery checker in Seaside, who recently said, when I was there, he said, don't I know you from somewhere? I'm sure I know you. I do. You're like somebody. And she kind of thought about this for a minute, and she says, I've got it now. I've got it. You're a Portland trailblazer. And I said, no, ma'am. I'm a middle-aged man. I'm one of your United States senators. Very proud to represent you. It was once my dream to play in the NBA. Went to school on a scholarship, but I never came close. She smiled and looked up at me and said, oh, well. Little humble pie here in the government business. So we're humble, but I think it's fair to say that Americans across the country are intrigued by what we're doing in our unique corner of the globe and this special place that we have carved out here. And even those who mispronounce our home and call us Oregon now realize that the D in Oregon's DNA stands for different. What's especially different about us, and we've seen it in these wonderful videos, Dave Frohnmeyer, so many of our leaders, is our commitment to innovation and to fresh ideas and fresh approaches to new challenges. And pioneering Oregon entrepreneurs and their ideas has, as has been noted, left us poised to play a big and growing role in the global economy. If you remember just one number on this issue with respect to trade, I'd suggest it is that there's going to be 1 billion people expected to join the global middle class by 2025. And what are those 1 billion people? The equivalent of 3 United States of America, my friends. What do they crave? They want access to so many of Oregon's unique and world-renowned innovation economy. That's right. People around the globe understand our capacity to constantly innovate. They want the precision tools that are built here in Oregon, the beef and the wheat that is grown here, the electronics, the medical devices and medicines that are researched and designed and manufactured here, and far too many other innovations to mention tonight. And I'll just tell a little story about how an innovation can pack a powerful punch. Back in 1996, when I came to the Senate and the earth had just cooled, the Congress was not exactly a hotbed of internet savvy. The talk show hosts were kind of making a lot of fun with us because one of the leaders at that time had said that the internet was a series of tubes. Now, I wasn't some big tech know-it-all, but I did know enough to ask some questions. And I got together with a Republican congressman from California, and we said, let's get involved in this new thing called the internet. Now, back then, there was a big fear and litigation and a fair number of disputes about whether websites or blogs could be held responsible, personally responsible, for something posted on the site. And again, I didn't know everything about technology, but it didn't strike me as making much sense. Because why would anybody invest in something that carried the threat of personal liability for something over which they had zero real control? So I wrote a law with a Republican to stop that threat. And now experts write reports and stuff, and they say that particular law has generated more than $1 trillion worth of value in the private economy, because without it you wouldn't have social media and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that kind of thing. Now, back to the humble department. My wife read this article. She, of course, owns one of the country's, great bookstores. I call Michael Powell, our Powell, Michael Powell of Powell's Books, and Nancy Wyden, I called them the LeBron James and Damian Lillard of books. She heard this quote about the $1 trillion, and she said, "It just goes to show that even a blind squirrel can find an acorn every now and again." So, I tell this story only because it shows that we make decisions. Sally Jewell talked about an important decision with Sage Grouse that's going to affect the West in our country for decades to come. And so tonight, I would like to spend just a few minutes to talk as friends about how I'd like all of us to collaborate together on another enormous challenge facing us in 2015. I believe that Oregon must be out front when it comes to reducing income inequality and creating more opportunity for those who now struggle to climb the economic ladder. According to the Census Bureau, Oregon now ranks somewhere between 21st and 24th among the states when it comes to income inequality. a disappointing middle of the pack. And suffice it to say, when you go to a duck or a beaver game, you don't find any fans holding signs, "We're 24th." Now, Democrats and Republicans, as Sally noted, don't agree on everything these days, but many of us in both parties find common ground in being concerned that declining economic opportunity is the defining issue of our time. Simply put, Oregon has to do better than being stuck in the middle on income inequality. And we can't just stand by while so many Oregonians keep getting lapped when they're just trying to keep pace with the standard of living their parents enjoy. Our cause, a phrase not of my own making, by the way, has to be making sure that working class parents are going to have middle class kids. The challenge, in my view, for our businesses is to make Oregon their business, to find ways to help educate and train workers for a good job, afford a home, and have a bigger stake in everyone getting ahead with approaches like expanded profit sharing. My take is that everybody would get ahead this way. For example, reducing income inequality means we'll have more middle-class individuals, which means more customers who can buy more traded goods and services. A virtuous circle. And government at every level's got to do its part. For example, as part of federal tax reform, and Sally made mention of this coming up, I'm going to try to pump new life into an idea that President Reagan and Democrats gave to all Americans by way of the chance to get ahead 3 decades ago. Ronald Reagan and a big group of Democrats decided together, Bob Packwood as well, behind this proposition, to treat income generated by a private equity manager on Wall Street the same as the wage income earned by a foundry worker here in Portland on Lombard Street. And I'm going to work on a sequel to the first ever transportation bonds program, because the last time we had it during the Recovery Act, we generated more than $180 billion of private investment to fund badly needed transportation projects here in our state and across America. Now, a lot of you know, and we've talked about it tonight, that I've worked with Oregonians of varying political philosophies, as well as the president and colleagues of both parties, because I believe that a big part of solving the income inequality puzzle means that you've got to have trade done right. 1 in 5 jobs depends on trade. More importantly, the trade jobs often pay better than do the non-trade jobs because they have a higher value-added component to them. And it only makes sense to pull out all the stops to get the Oregon brand into the global market. Now, in the past, we've talked about tax reform. We touched on that tonight. Transportation, trade done right. And so, in wrapping up, I'd just like to broaden our focus on economic reform with a new approach to tackling income inequality that builds on Oregon's great outdoors. And Sally and I are going to be talking about this more tomorrow. God has blessed our state with spectacular mountains, a gorgeous coastline, and scenic